What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Non-Standard Podcast. I'm your host, Manny Lamson. Today, we are honored to be joined by Cadet Zane Peecher, who is a junior at the United States Air Force Academy and was just selected for TACP officer after we battled it out last week at the assessment week. It was brutal. It was crazy. We talked about how it made us both a better person and a better leader. But more importantly, I dive a little bit more in depth about what the Academy teaches, how it teaches leadership, how it teaches the cadets to just be a better person. And some of the things that Zane talks about is the Academy helps build confidence. It helps, obviously, with athletic PT. It gets them going there. It helps them develop a leadership style early in their career. It helps them build relationships, helps them be helps them be genuine, empathy, and lead by example. A lot of the things I look for in more experienced people, I was glad to hear it from a cadet at the academy. Obviously, we all know military academies are very prestigious and do a great job, but it was just great to hear from somebody there that's going through it now. And I look forward to what he does in the future and really all the cadets. So if you have any questions or you're curious about leadership, this is the podcast. Feel free to follow, comment, share, save, provide me feedback. Reach out to me on my Instagram. It's just Manny Mustache. It's pretty simple there. I will leave Zane's info as well, and we will also cover the book he talks about as well at the end. Go out and enjoy the episode. And as always, build some more to your leadership toolbox. What is up, everybody? Thanks for jumping in on this episode. Just like I mentioned in the intro, I have my man Zane here, and we became very close last week. So if you're listening, it was March 18th through the 23rd, 2023, when we went through top T selection to become a TACP officer. And it was insane. We'll hit that a little bit later as we talk about how it's helped develop both of our leadership skills. But for most of you guys, you are familiar with my script. We're going to dive into the 3 H's. And for those of you that have heard before, I got these from a good friend of mine who was asked these in an interview for a letter of rec. So it was from our commander of our base at Dias. He asked the guy straight up, like, hey, I want to know your 3 H's. And I like the philosophy. It's a great way to get to know somebody and get the juices flowing. So we'll start there, and then we'll dive into my leadership philosophy, pick it apart, see what he likes, what he doesn't like, and then we'll dive into some leadership traits, and then a book recommendation at the end. But less talking from me. Zane, let's dive into these 3 H's, and if there's anything extra you want to add, man, I'll probably jump in there, but it's all you.
Yeah, right off the bat, hometown from Detroit, Michigan, Motor City.
Are you a Lions fan?
I would normally say sadly yes, but this year I'm saying happily I am a Lions fan.
Okay, I'm like the exact opposite. So I'm a Patriots fan, happily yes. The past few years, sadly yes. So
I feel it. It's a struggle we have around here, but yeah, 2 heroes. I have a super cliche one of my dad. He got me through everything, sports, high school, sending me to the academy as well. And that was, the things he did to get me here. And I also have to go with Tech Sergeant John Chapman, putting his life on the line for a team of guys that he wasn't even in the same service with. Just insane stuff, super admirable. I look up to him. My one hardship is top T.
Let's talk about so Chapman, that was from the Operation Anaconda, right around there, right?
Yeah.
And then he had the book, what was it? I've read it, but
I think it was Alone at Dawn.
Alone at Dawn. Those are the words of my mouth. Yeah. So obviously a quick recommendation for a book if you guys haven't read it. For those listening, I think he was awarded the Medal of Honor, right?
Yeah.
Yep. But a great book with there's a few books actually written about Operation Anaconda. So Pete Blatter wrote The Mission, the Men, and Me, which is about that operation as well. And then I'm reading another one called, I think it's Live to Die Another Day or something. It's the recap of Operation Anaconda as well. More of the big picture scope on some of the downfalls, but also the achievements that happened during that event and operation as well. But yeah, let's dive into some hardships, man, because we'll both be able to talk about this one pretty deep, and then we'll get into like the academy and a little bit of that background too.
Yeah. So, just like you said, I I really have two hardships that really tested me. Top T, which we have some good experiences with, but also freshman year at the academy, because they kind of throw a lot of stuff at you pretty fast and expect you to carry the slack. So
yeah, for those of you guys, I probably won't mention it in the intro, but Zane is only 20. So the reason I was pumped to have Zane on is, one, I want to establish where like the leadership is in this newer generation. In the past, a lot of leadership traits and skills and techniques have been developed like in war, right? So you get guys like Jocko and all these guys like Sean Ryan telling their war stories where they develop leadership traits. But one of the focuses on why I want to do this podcast is to see where the future is coming from, where they are getting these leadership traits from, and how they're going to apply them when they get into the military. And heck, even right now at the academy where Zane's at right now. So let's start off with the freshman year. I want you to talk about why you decided to go to the academy, how that freshman year, got you going, and what were some of the specific tough parts that you learned as far as a leader that applied that freshman year.
yeah, so I originally wanted to go because I wanted to be a special tactics officer. Funny enough, obviously ended up changing my mind to TAC P, but I knew it was a super elite institution. I knew they had a lot of hard academics, hard leadership lessons you could learn. So I was like, I'm going there. Started out with basic cadet training, which I know is super similar to basic military training, except we do it all in the dorms at the academy, and it's cadet led. We have a few MTIs running around, but just 6 weeks. There's really no leadership lessons there. I'm sure it's similar with BMT, but they kind of throw you out as soon as it's done. Like, okay, you're a cadet. Congratulations. You're going to do everything that regular cadets do, except you have to do a bunch of other kind of like stipulations. Like you have to walk at attention in the hallways at all times of the day. You have to greet upperclassmen by their full name and rank. And the rank just being cadet followed by master sergeant, cadet captain, cadet. I mean, we have all the ranks through the cadet chain of command. But we also have these things called DDTs. I think it's directed development time. And that's really where you get the bulk of your learning, your leadership learning. They kind of just throw you in the crap. They're like, here's kind of a task we need you to get done. Like one of my examples is a 5-mile ruck we did with the whole class. So we're split into squadrons, and we basically call our squadron of freshmen a flight because we were a flight during basics, so we just keep calling it a flight. And there's a lot of differences. There's strong leaders but weak physicality. There's super strong physicality but people who just don't know how to lead.
Yeah.
And then you're putting all those people together in a ruck march, and everyone's got to work together. So it's like super, super high learning curve because you don't know what you're going to do. You show up in the hallway at 1600. They say, okay, pack your rucks with 50 pounds and just follow us. Like, I don't know where this is going. I'm scared. But, leading a bunch of scared guys, like, hey guys, this is fine. 50 pounds is easy, trying to line up the load for the people. And then especially for the people who are weak physically, learning to grab a ruck or maybe hold from the bottom and get these people up the hill quicker. You got to make those decisions pretty fast in those scenarios because the upperclassmen are there yelling at you the whole time, kind of like cadre. But I mean, it's super steep learning curve, and you got to figure it out fast.
Yeah, I love. That's good to know. I'm really pumped to hear like the leadership. It starts super early in the academy. Now, I did ROTC when I commissioned, and it's like the exact opposite. So ROTC, right, is like one class a semester, and you have one lab once a week on Thursday night. And that is like your leadership lab, which is at Thursday night once a week, and it's like 2 hours long. But it's not a lot. And so it's really good to see, I say the academy, really throw in that leadership early. And it sounds like it's just like right to the fire. You guys get there. Obviously, for those listening, with the academy being a very high prestigious school, there's a bunch of type A personalities. They're all there, ready to be the best and ready to grind. And that's cool. I like that. And obviously, with a lot of the stuff, we've both done, we understand like doing hard things, right, is a great mental capacity to build good leadership and motivation. And just like we learned last week, nothing will humble you more or make you prouder than throwing a ruck on your back and not knowing how long you're going to go for. Okay, cool. So freshman year, you guys hit the ground running. You're thrown into a bunch of leadership tasks. Are you guys taught anything specific, like leadership styles or techniques or tactics? Or is it just you guys like learning, I don't know, like obviously seeing what people do above you, or what's that like?
So it's kind of a multitude. We, at first at least, go off of the people above us. Like, okay, this is how they're leading us, so we're going to lead our people like that.
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, we have this thing called M5 because we have a super like high school style block schedule of classes, and every other day it's like M day and T day, as in like Monday and Tuesday. And they on M5, so right after lunch, is a block schedule where they dedicate it to character and leadership development.
Nice.
And those are kind of the times where they teach you here's how you should do feedback with your peers. Here's how you should make sure you're keeping up with the people. Here's how to do interpersonal relationships. A bunch of leadership style stuff. Nothing that's kind of like you're in the stuff doing the work. More of like, you're commanding a squadron type of stuff. But obviously that's where a majority of Air Force officers are going to be. So that's, super important skill set for them. But that's kind of where we slowly start to develop those styles.
Did you say that was taught by cadets or other Air Force officers during that time?
So usually it's our commander. Our air officer commanding is our squadron commander. They are active duty officers.
Okay, cool. So nothing wrong with the cadet teaching it, but I just want to make sure like you guys are hearing some of the perspectives from the people in the military. Just like I talked about Top T, right? I was like, one of my biggest wins of Top T was when we got to sit down with the cadre and like pick their brains, right? Understand where even though it was a pretty short time, but that was one of the main things I wanted you guys to accomplish. Heck, even me, I learned a lot too. But hearing their stories, like you guys got to hear our stories during the nighttime stuff, but to hear the actual TACP officers and enlisted give their background is huge too. Okay, cool. So you have those times, you develop leadership stuff. What were some of the traits you started to hone in on early in your academy career? Obviously, I have a list. If you want to bring up some of those, you can, if you know. But what were some traits you started always having on your belt ready to go?
Yeah, so I would say the confidence right off the bat. And I have a specific story for this. One thing that we do during freshman year, and I think this comes from the pilot community. I think that's the reason we do it. But we do stand-ups.
Yep.
But instead of doing like, oh, this just happened, what are the steps you're doing in reaction? It's just what we call knowledge questions, because we get a book called Contrails, and it's just a ton of information. Like this, like the F-22, it's got service ceiling, maximum. It's got all the stats. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but like you're expected to know the whole book. It's probably about 80 pages front and back. And you go in there and you're like, okay, I know for a fact I'm not going to know everything, but it's better to give an answer than to stand there with my mouth closed. At least that's what they teach us. So like that confidence step, I know I'm wrong, but at least I'm doing something, is kind of one of the main takeaways I had from the whole freshman year experience.
Nice. Anything else? I saw on here you have your athletic NCO. I assume that's a little bit later in, but have you always been sort of an athlete? Obviously, I got to see it last week, but how'd that background apply to the academy?
Yeah, so athletics-wise at the academy, our PT test is super difficult to max out. Like I got a 470 out of 500.
Okay.
And that was 5 days before Top T, and you saw how in shape I felt at Top T. So athletics is super hard. Like they really want it to be impossible to be the best. Like I have zero room to improve. They really don't want you to feel that. Like they want you to always be improving. But as far as the job itself goes, it's more of just leading out. Like, okay, this is when the PT test is. Make sure the squadron's aware of when the PT test is, and also lead out unit PT sessions. Essentially, like, okay, I know you guys are bad at push-ups. Like, let's get this group down doing push-ups together, making sure their numbers are high enough to pass. Because in the end, the squadron needs all their people to pass, or else there's going to be consequences for the squadron. Like some people are going to be spending time working out, like mandatory, because they failed. Things of that nature.
Nice. Okay, so you get through your freshman year, you're moving into your sophomore and junior year. Anything else stand out there that you started figuring out about yourself? It sounds like you already had the TAC PO special warfare job lined up, right? You didn't want to be a pilot or anything like that?
For some reason, it just never appealed to me.
And then Did you know that going into the academy, or were you aware that like ROTC or anything else had those programs, or was just the academy like the way you wanted to go to get there?
For some reason, my eyes were always set on the academy. I really can't explain why. It was just one of those things like, this sounds awesome. It sounds like they got their own separate culture over there. Like, I'm just going to go be a part of that. But yeah, I always had my eyes on it. I didn't really know any ROTC programs because I just never looked into it.
Okay, nice. What did you know about? So for those that are new and don't know, Top T is the selection to become an officer in the TACP, Tactical Air Control Party for the Air Force. Sometimes they'll throw around the word JTAC associated with it because it's a duty you can get through the job. What did you know about that prior to Top T or going into your early years in the academy? What'd you know?
I had no clue my early years in the academy. I was just like, this is what I want to do. I don't know how to do it, but I'm going to do it. So I kind of threw myself in there. But we have a program called the Special Warfare Club over there, which actually kind of streamlines the whole process. Like, oh, you want to do this? These are the steps to do it. And these are the events that we're going to have to prepare you. So like that, some of those movements that we had as a team, like those weren't the first time I had done movements similar to those.
Nice.
Simply because we were getting into practice. And so like that's when I knew I had to submit a phase 1 application. And that's when I knew, like, one of the main things I knew that got me through it was the fact that the people who had gone previously told us that, yeah, guys, we're not allowed to say much, but just expect to rest a lot. And we're like, okay, I don't know what that means, but like I guess I've got to prepare myself to rest a lot. So really didn't know much. That NDA works wonders. But
yeah. Cool. So you hear about TACP, let's see, and then you're a junior. So what's your plan? What's your mindset now, right? So you just got selected. You're going into the end of your junior year. This might be pretty new since we just went through it last week, but what's on your mind now for your senior year? What are you going to try to do to help yourself, but also help some of the cadets out there?
Yeah, so I'm not sure. Like you said, just going through last week, the last 2.5 years of my life were devoted to I need to pass phase 2 and get selected at phase 2. So kind of learning about the schoolhouse, especially at the feedback sessions with the cadre, that was one of the main things. Like, I have no clue about the schoolhouse. All I know is I need to pass phase 2. So kind of doing that, but also wanting to give back a little bit. Like, clearly, and I'm not sure still, I'm still trying to figure it out, but clearly there's something that I did that the cadre liked enough to, push me through the program. So I have to figure out what that is and then be able to translate that to all the TACP officer hopefuls at the academy to,
Nice.
kind of try and give back and make sure that everyone has the best shot possible that they have at getting into the career.
Yeah. So the way I looked at our class, right? So for those listening, we had 25 going into it. 24 showed up. 9 failed the IFT day 1. So that's a huge thing when you go through Top T. You have to do that. So then we were down to 50. There were 16. We lost another one. We're down to our core 15. That was like our group, right? Our team. At the end, I think 7 were selected, 3 prior TACPs, the PJ for the enlisted side, and then you had you, Kyle, and Noah for I think all you guys were captain. No, Kyle was ROTC, right?
And we had Wes too, so I think we had 8. 8 were selected.
Oh, Wes was selected?
Yeah.
Oh, shoot. No, okay, perfect. So 4 and 4, perfect. Yeah. Now, when I did a lot of my stuff, I was sort of like going back and forth when I was doing like my ratings and looking, and you guys were right up there. And what I saw was just that ability to take charge, which is really cool to see in like just younger people. That was probably the one thing I think you'll learn to take back is, hey guys, if there's anything, and you've already hit it already, is being able to make those decisions. Which talk about the academy does a great job, helping you establish that. Being confident and just sort of saying something to get the ball rolling, and then from there figuring out. I think that's probably one thing. And then obviously, like, hey, you do have to be pretty physically, minded. It's not that you have to be in great shape. You just have to have grit. I think that's one where it definitely overshines the physical fitness of really just any selection process. What was cool is there wasn't really like a specific quota for a lot of the stuff we did, as far as like a time or a distance. It was just like, keep going.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah,
stop.
that was for sure something. And one of the struggles that I really wanted to mention here that a lot of active duty officers like yourself probably kind of overshadow or don't even realize is that as cadets, like we've never pinned down a real rank before. Like I'm 20 years old, I'm going in, and some people in our class are captains, promotable to major. So some people are 40 years old, and I'm 20 years old, having imposter syndrome here. Like, how am I expected to lead an active duty PJ, real officers, and people who have been alive for twice my lifetime? It's like super stressful because I'm saying these things and I'm thinking that I'm being judged when in reality I know you guys are in the same boat and you're just like, that's what TL said, that's what we have to do. And
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a curve I had to get over. I wasn't really expecting it to start.
Let's talk about the imposter syndrome. Some people listening may know what it is. It's a tough one, but what is your definition of the imposter syndrome in people?
Yeah, so my personal definition is kind of just I'm here, but I don't deserve to be here. Um, and that kind of kicked in just like what I just said. When there's an active duty PJ echoing the things that I'm saying because he's looking at me for leadership or to be the team leader, to be confident, I'm like, do I even deserve to be here? This guy has his PJ beret. I'm a cadet. I'm a junior. I haven't even pinned down an officer rank yet. And I am expected to lead guys like this. It's just, I feel like an imposter in the group.
No, it's definitely a tough one. It's hard one for people to combat. Um, yeah, that's it. I love the imposter syndrome is tough. I think I go through it quite a bit as well when I'm helping people too. But let's dive into my leadership philosophy here. So we're going to pick it apart. I want you to give some examples of what you like about it, where you've seen it apply. Maybe if there was anything you would add, and then I'll explain a couple of them as well. So just like most people listening, I mentioned earlier, going through ACSC as a major in the Air Force, you have to take a class on leadership. And one of them is a leadership class. And the class specifically asks you, hey, you're about to take charge of this squadron. You have to have a leadership philosophy to brief to your team on how you lead. And I love it. I love a lot about leadership. This is why I'm doing this. And mine came down to 4 statements, and they work in priority, top to bottom. Like you have to have one before you move on to the next. The first one is lead by example in all you do. The second one is to be selfless. You have to be selfish. Third one is build relationships based off trust and care. And the fourth one is challenge the road in front of you, getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Now, out of a couple of those, give some examples maybe where you saw that in your ROTC or not ROTC Academy, and then maybe top T. And if there's any, if you want me to specify or clarify any of them, let me know too.
Yeah, the one that stands out to me as something that most people would probably say, why does that make any sense? Is, to be selfless, you have to be selfish. And I obviously have an example from both, but to start off with the academy example, like we're college students, and I don't know if you're aware, but we have to get a Bachelor of Science. So like right now I'm a business major, but I'm in astronautical engineering. I don't that's kind of a curve we have to get over. But in one of those things, like in order to help my group and group projects, I have to understand the material. So if I'm showing up to the group with no knowledge of anything, like I'm really bringing the group down. So if I'm showing up and instead I say, hey guys, I'm going to be 30 minutes late, I have to read over the material, but then I show up 30 minutes late and I actually understand and can help the group. It's like now I'm actually helping the team. I'm not just showing up because they said to show up. I'm showing up because I understand the material. I'm late, but I'm able to help. So that's one of those things that it makes sense because if you're not together, then your team's not going to be together.
Nice. I love it. That is definitely one of the ones where I get like a lot of those weird looks like, oh, that sounds selfish, like I've had people tell me like, man, that one's weird because I don't want to tell people that because I don't want them to focus on themselves instead of the team. That's some of the feedback I get, and that's sort of why I have that one in there. Once I did that for myself on like my journey 3 years ago, it opened up doors so much faster than me trying to like keep help people, but not being able to help myself. And so for those listening, there's a bunch of expressions out there. One we use in the Air Force, like put your gas mask on first, right? Or if you're in the airplane, like put your mask on first, then help somebody else. And it's a hard one to conceptualize because you have to understand, and that's how the subordinates are going to look up to you as well. If you are delegating tasks or asking somebody to do something, first thing that's going to go in their mind is like, can they do this if I wasn't there? And that's why I try to always maintain a physical appearance, because I need to know, like, hey, if I tell somebody to go get 100% on the PT test, which a lot of commanders and leaders do in the military, like, hey, airman or lieutenant so-and-so, go get 100. And you're looking at them like, dude, I guarantee you can't even get a 75, man. Like, that's one of them right there. And and the only reason I can say that now is because I put in the work to get 300% in a row on the PT test. And now I can say it. Before, that wasn't me. So I couldn't tell, like, my subordinates, like, hey, dude, good luck on your PT test. Go get 100, go crush it. And then, because they're probably like, well, you don't get 100. Like, why do I have to get 100? But yeah, so it's a good one. It's a good one. What else you got?
Yeah, well, I mean, a top T example is super similar, but like when you have your ruck on, there's 4 cadre in your face because you're team leader, and you realize that you're the only person without your 2 leader in your ruck. Not that this happened to me, but you're the only person without your water source in your ruck, and you tell everyone got it, awesome, we're good to go, but you don't have it. It's like, it's not only do you have less weight now, but when you're thirsty, you're not going to have water, and you're going to be like, hey, I need water from one of the other guys, and the other guy's like, I don't want to give you my water, I'm thirsty too. So it's kind of like, if you don't have your gear squared away, then you can't get the team's gear squared away either.
Yeah, and then some people may be thinking, like, it's faster to do things, right, without focusing on myself. Like, maybe a lot of leaders are going to be like, well, I need to help everybody get ready, go help them do this or do this. And then when it's time to go, if they're not ready, that's huge. It's a tough thing for a leader to do, really, to take care of themselves first. Just like in top T, when we were told to do things and you get your pack on really quick, you're like, okay, I think I'm ready to go. I'm good. And you look around, you're like, shoot, I should have helped somebody. But then you're like, well, I got to take care of myself first and then, go help other people. We'd all love to help each other, but in the end, if we're all helping each other, it doesn't really get done.
Yeah.
So you got to take those couple extra seconds to help yourself. Nice. What other ones sort of stood out?
Yeah, so building relationships, I thought was huge, especially at top T. When I'm team leader, if I don't have relationships with the people I'm leading, then they have literally no reason to follow what I'm saying. So if I don't build relationships, like, hey, this is my background, these are my experiences, and just not give them an ultimatum, but like, and because of these things, I just hope that I can build a trust within us that makes it so when you're team leader, I'm trusting you. Well, when I'm team leader, you're trusting me. And there's really no reason to drop the trust within the team. And if everyone can manage to do that, and it's much less the leader to the subordinates, but it's everyone to everyone. Mm-hmm. Because, at some point, especially in top T, everyone's going to be leading something at some point. Everyone needs that trust. And if we can knock that out early, like as soon as we show up, like, hey guys, this is me, tell me about you, awesome, like I'm building trust with you already, then it is exponential to the team's ability to work as a team.
Yeah. So give me some examples of some ways to build trust, either at the academy or in a new group or in a new team. What are some ways you've either been taught to build trust or you've seen because it seems simple, right? It's probably one of the easiest things. I said on my last one. It's weird in the military how we give kudos to people when they build relationships, when it's like, dude, we're all human. We should be doing this like no matter what. Like, it doesn't matter that it's like going to help me get the job done. Like, I should be able to build relationships with literally anybody out there. But what are some examples you got?
Yeah, I mean, my number one example, and I think this worked pretty well at top T, but correct me if I'm wrong, because I also built a relationship with you over there. But just going out and being genuinely interested in people. Like, let's say I'm going up to Kyle, I'm like, oh, you're ROTC over at Boulder or School of Mines. Like, tell me about that, man. Like, I want to know all about that. I want to know about you. I want to understand your situation. I want to know who Kyle is, and then really not talk about myself, because if I talk about myself, I'm going to come across as wrong. Like, dude, I don't really care about you. And I feel like it comes a little bit in the conversation when you're just shooting them with questions, trying to understand them, and they're like, they step back and they say, what about you? Like, you tell me about yourself. And that kind of just builds trust because it's showing genuine care.
Yes. I wrote that down. Genuine care, empathy, right? plus people want to talk, man. Like that's just the way we're built. We want to talk about ourselves. And so to let somebody do it is a way to build relationships. And that's, yeah. And sometimes if we don't have things in common, like for me, I didn't have things in common with, there were a couple people, but I was trying to figure out like, how do I build that, And so sometimes it's not necessarily what I have in common with them, but what we don't have, or just what I want to know, just something I want to know. We all have similar stuff in common, right? Like if you're a cadet, you're going to school. For those of us that were active duty, we had jobs like that. But yeah, that's good. Genuine empathy and care. That's good. Do you have any examples of this at the academy? Like, what do you guys, as freshmen, right? How many people are in a freshman class?
So there's about 1,100 in the whole wing. So we break it down into wing, group, squadron. It's super similar to active duty.
Yep.
But there's 1,100 in the wing, but you really only get, you only build relationships with about 25 or 27 that are in your squadron. So all the freshmen that are in your squadron, because you go through basic training together, you have these super strong relationships already. And although you only get to live with them for 1 year before you switch into different squads, which is part of the relationship building, they want you to meet new people. But going through basic, you got to build relationships with these people because, like, yeah, I'm depending on you to do tasks, but like I still don't know who you are as a person. Like, I think that's important to continue doing the task. And what I actually noticed is as we got to know each other better, like these tasks were done quicker, these tasks were done with more precision. And it's kind of the same thing, like showing the people empathy, like, yeah, we're all going through the suck, man. Like, what are you going to do after the suck? Like just talking with people, trying to understand where they're at. Okay.
Nice. I like that. Yeah. Yeah, it's how it is, like one of the things you talk about is, a lot of people call it trauma bonding, right? Is a phrase thrown out there. Doing hard things together, being physical with each other is a great way to build relationships, because you're sweating, you're grinding, and it's just showing people like, hey, I can get to know this person through comfort or crisis, right? So that's one of the leadership traits I throw in there is getting to know people between comfort and crisis. Comfort being the times you can control, the times where it's, obviously easier. And then crisis is not when you want to get to know somebody. Like I don't want to go through a time of crisis, and someone's like, hey man, I need you to go to Zane's house and like go find him. He's not here. And I'm like, oh, I don't know where Zane lives. Well, how do you not know where he lives? Like you guys have known each other for like 4 months. Well, oh shoot. Well, then that's the time of crisis where you don't want to have a relationship. Right. That's why PT is always a great example of a comfort time to get to know people. It sounds like at the academy, there's plenty of those times together when you talk about your little labs, a class, right? College in general is just a good time to get to know people. And then during Top T, we had it during those times of, I don't know, we call it rest time or down time or whatever it was, recuperate, try not to die time. But what was cool about it is it wasn't forced on us to get to know each other. We sort of had to do it to get better. Like the cadre never said, one of your tasks is to get to know people, right? They didn't force that upon us, which is what I sort of like. In a lot of other leadership places, they may tell you, hey guys, one of your tasks, right, is to go get to know 3 people outside of your workplace and come back and like, tell me what you learned. But that's sort of like forcing it. We made it pretty, like you said, we cared and it was empathy and that's how it was. That's how those relationships were built there. We're sort of just sitting around probably the first day, like looking at each other like, all right, I remember this guy from the Signal chat. I remember this guy from the Signal chat. But then like something clicked, like I need to get to know these people because it is going to matter in times of crisis. And it did, like you said, like during times of crisis, during Top T, when it was, okay, I know I've already talked to Manny about this. If something crazy comes up, I know I can go to him, like when we were doing some of the knot time stuff, there were times where people were like, oh, Manny knows how to tie knots. Let's do this because we built that in those relationships through getting to know each other. And that's why the comfort in crisis is a huge one there. And yes, my big thing with relationships is most problems can be solved by if the people have good relationships. And I think you already hit that too. It's insane how much work will get done as well if people care.
Yeah, and I think another big thing from Top T is that we all were the same personality type. And although we had a lot of different life experiences, we all wanted to be officers in a combat career field. And not only a combat career field, but a special warfare career field. So like we were all similar people. And I think that also made it super easy to just go up to somebody we have the same goal. We bond. We want the same things. It made it super
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah, that was definitely a group of like-minded people. But it was still cool to, like you said, to find all the differences too. Um, like, talking to somebody from a different school and then get to know them there and watch that. But I'm going to ask you one about the leading by example, right? So what are some ways the academy you've seen people lead by example there, and how do you try to do it? Like it sounds like a basic one, but it's obviously my most important one because that's why it's at the top. But what have you seen in that one?
Yeah, so the academy is super weird with this one, just because unless it's the summer, it's pretty much you're focused only on school, and like those leadership labs will come in. But a good example I gave is right before I went to Top T, I took an Astro exam, and I wasn't paying attention. I'm still not entirely sure what we learned, and that's a bad example. That's one of those things like I should have studied for this earlier, but I'm so stressed out I'm going to do it. And that's one of the things that relates into it. All of my friends in the squadron, they're like, dude, I totally understand. That's a hard class. We'll just back brief you later. And I was like, this is awesome. Like, I'm going through times of stress, and these guys are literally leading me to like give me what matters to me because grades matter. I don't necessarily need to listen to that brief, but it's going to make me a better officer. So, like, even the guys who aren't going through the stress with you, just simply saying things like that. I know it's not really necessarily leading by example, but they are helping the guys in stress. I think that's super, super important, especially at the academy, where there's some people who take 14 credit hours and some people who take 22 in a single semester. It's like
I didn't know you guys had that much, like I guess difference in class. I thought it was pretty structured. Like it's like a lot of the same. I guess the credits were a lot closer grouped.
They definitely are. I'm not sure how I ended up with 19 this semester because exactly 1 year ago I had 14. I was like, this is the life. I'm living it up. And now they gave me 19, 3 of which are STEM classes. So I'm like, man, I don't know if I'm going to make it out alive. But, always moving forward, I'm really leaning on the guys who are already smart in that respect. That's another one of the teamwork aspects that we really have to learn quick. I know this guy's good at astronautical engineering. I'm going to go talk to him. I'm going to get tutored by him because he's a resource literally right next to my dorm room.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another key trait is, you're never the smartest person in the room, no matter where you go. And that's sometimes a tough one to swallow. Like I could have went into Top T, being like, I'm technically the most senior rated person, but I was still like, I'm not the smartest, Will and, the TAC Ps definitely have the tactical experience. They're like, I told a lot of people, I was like, dude, you guys, I was almost like a cadet going through Top T. I literally know nothing about like ground stuff whatsoever. So I'm just like soaking it all. And then we had the Army guys too, right? Like Daniel, and then Zach. They were in there, I think it was Zach Eager, I think his name was.
Max,
yep.
Yeah.
But then they had some of the Army perspective as well. So I'm like, dang, these guys definitely have the perspective there. And that's where you have to understand, like, you're never the smartest person in the room. How do we find those people? How do we use them to our advantage? And so it was really cool to hear, them give their expertise. And that's,
and it was super cool as well. I thought to just listen to them, listen to everyone run through the same problems differently. When we had some of those problems we had to solve, and I see Daniel or Max up there, and I'm like, man, I never would have thought of that. The Army must be teaching some different kind of like problem solving, like processes, but I never would have thought of that. So those guys clearly have a process that is beneficial to have on the team because it's a different point of view.
Yeah, the Army, I think, does a pretty good job teaching some of those basic leadership concepts early in those people's career because they're in charge of a lot of people compared to a lot of the Air Force jobs. Or, if you're a flyer, you're per se not in charge of a lot of people right away early in your career. You're focused on you and maybe your crew, so it's very small. And then, but yeah, let's see. What was it? Oh, that brought up a good point. Oh, at the academy, do you guys ever have any interactions with other branches or get to build that joint, I guess, interpersonal relationship, or how's that work?
Yeah, so super rare opportunity because we do this program called, I'm not exactly sure the name, but we'll flip flop. Like a guy from West Point will come to the academy, and then a guy from the academy will fill his place at West Point, and they'll do that for a semester. And that kind of gives them an understanding of the other branch. I think it's also just meant to give them new thought processes because, like we just said, different branches for some reason just think differently through different problems. But that's an opportunity we get. We also get the same opportunity with international cadets.
Okay.
So they'll bring in like a Brazilian exchange cadet, a French exchange cadet, and they'll just live here, and we'll send a guy to France or a guy to Brazil, and they'll do the same thing. Get experience with their lifestyle, but also their problem solving processes. And that's our exposure. We don't get much because, like I said, there's only one or two cadets here at a single time. But like they're there and they are a resource. It's just not it's not widespread. Not everyone gets to feel that.
And then are all the professors at the Academy Air Force, or are there any, I don't know if they do any joint professors or.
So it's mostly Air Force. I know we have at least one Army officer. I don't know what he teaches, but the big one is foreign language professors. We have a German Luftwaffe officer teaching German. We have a Japanese officer teaching Japanese. Okay. So things like that. So those are, I mean, when you see those foreign uniforms, it's like, wow, those things are shiny and they're cool looking.
What's the interaction with the officers at the academy? Do you guys ever have time to pick their brains on, what jobs they do, like a career day thing? Is that like structured throughout your whole time, or is it more towards the end of the academy?
It's the whole time. There's usually not dedicated time. A lot of the times you kind of got to go out of your way to an instructor after your class and just be like, hey, sir, like, I know you're a pilot. Pilot's a big one because half the school usually wants to be pilots. Hey, sir, I know you're a pilot. Could you tell me a little bit about the process that you took to get there and some of the experiences that, a younger generation could be benefited from learning? But there's super rarely time where they'll have a pilot sit down and just talk to people. It does happen like once a semester, but it's really not something that they do often.
Nice. Let's see here. What are you nervous about going into active duty Air Force? Obviously, you have one more year, right? So you still have time to like get those goosebumps out. But let's say you're a senior this year. You're getting ready to, let's say the schoolhouse is passed. You go through TACP schoolhouse. You're getting ready to go to a flight or a squadron to be a flight commander. What are some things you're nervous about? What are some things you feel pretty good about? What do you know?
Yeah, so I'm super nervous, and I got this in my feedback with a lot of the cadre. I'm super nervous that I'm going to show up to a squadron and everyone's just going to try to like abuse the new LT. Yeah. Like, oh, this guy's here. I want him to do this. And like, I'm going to go talk to him about this. My perception, and this is probably a negative perception, but it's just the way that I feel like everyone's described it, is I'm going to show up to a squadron. I'm going to have a ton of NCOs coming up to me and telling them they want this to change. They want this to change. When in reality, I don't even know how it works in the first place. So like, I'm not going to change.
Do I just run the ball, or do I like move a?
Yeah, like I don't know how it works. I'm not going to change it without an understanding of how it works. But also, maybe it needs to be changed. So like somehow balancing those things together just makes me super nervous.
Man, I like it. That's good. What are some things you think you could do that you're not? This is a tough one. Someone asks you what you think you can do, but you don't know what you can do. That you've heard works. So I don't know if you have my leadership traits thing next to you, but what are some of those leadership traits in that list that you think will apply when you become a flight commander that you aren't really good at now?
Feedback is one of my things, and this is something that you actually taught the group at Top T. You sat us down, we had a debrief, and it was just a big feedback session. But I don't have experience doing feedback. Like that was probably my first experience in my cadet career where I did actual, like, I'm not saying life or death, but like feedback that mattered in the moment that they had to fix within the next 2 days, or else, bad things are going to happen. Yeah. And I think that's a big thing, especially with the big advice everyone gives. And that's at the academy. That was at Top T. That's pretty much everyone we ever talked to is like, find an NCO and lean on them. First of all, I don't know how to find a good NCO. I don't know if he's bad or good, and it's going to be hard to get a grasp for that. Yeah. But getting feedback with them, like, hey, let's say hypothetically I find one, right? I know they're a good one. Yeah. Saying I just did this, Sergeant so and so. How did that affect the squadron? Was that a good call? Like, can I just pick your brain on it so that I can move forward and make better decisions in the future?
Yeah. Feedback is hard, but it's one of the most important leadership traits out there. And like I said at Top T, in the flying community, we are pretty good at feedback. We're good at giving it, and we're good at taking it. And that's why I always try to teach that to other officers or airmen that I work with, because in other communities in the military, you'll find out feedback is not, it's not important. It's not preached well. It's not given well. It's given very standard, right? Like, hey, you suck at this, do this to get better. We'll talk in like 6 months. Like, no, like you heard me, like feedback should be continuous. A leader and a subordinate should always be asking for feedback, even if it's short. Like, hey, like some examples I would give for you when you come as a new flight commander is almost daily, you should be asking somebody around you how you're doing. One, you're gauging what do they know I should be doing, even if it's like the young A1C that just got out of the schoolhouse. And what are his expectations for you? You don't know unless you ask him. So you should be going up to the youngest person. Hey, I'm Zane. I'm your new flight commander. What do you expect from me? How'd I do today? And if they're like, oh, I didn't know you were here. Boom, like light bulb. Okay, I need to tell everybody I'm here. Okay, Have I not had a sit down with the flight yet? Have I not met with people one-on-one? That was one of my big things as a young flight commander of the AFE is I made sure to have relationships with everybody and get to know everybody one-on-one. So at least they knew where I was coming from. And then luckily the feedback from the top is going to be hard as an officer. It's always hard. It's one of my pet peeves because usually our superiors as an officer, as like a lieutenant, are going to be someone that's like an ADO or a DO or a commander. They are busy. So they are not going to have a lot of time to give you officer feedback. Like when I was in the flying squadron, the only officer feedback I got was very rare. It was like when my OPR was due and my flight commander would be like, hey, Snare, go give me your bullets. We'll write up your OPR and we'll be good. I was like, what? How am I doing? Like, I don't know. Like, but it was everybody's OPR was the same as a flyer. So there was that too. I didn't get actual feedback until I was a captain, maybe 2 years in, because I was in the OSS, so an operations support squadron. I wasn't in a flying squadron. My direct superior was my DO and my commander, so very busy people. And I had to make sure I was at least going to them. Man, I try to do feedback almost once every 3 months with my commander here, even if it's just like a quick email, like, hey, sir, how am I doing? Or like a scheduled sit down. But without me pushing it or starting it, it would never happen until like the standard OPB. Hey, here's your initial counseling. Here's your review, your OPB. Good luck. Continue doing what you're doing. Officer side, it's hard. I'll tell you that. Because it's weird. We're like expected to take care of ourselves, but we're in the same boat as everybody else. We're in a new job. Like if you take rank and experience out of any job, everybody's on like a pedestal, right? To get from low to high. So if you're an A1C trying to get to senior airman or lieutenant trying to get to captain, you're working up. So there's always supposed to be feedback somewhere, no matter that. So that's why feedback is definitely a tough one. What was the other one you talked about? You talked about
NCOs, about my NCOs.
Yeah. How do you know sort of like who's good, right? Like that comes with the relationship. So one thing is time. Time is huge. A lot of young leaders I see out there are quick to execute, but slow to like prosecute and, prioritize. Because we think to be a good leader, we have to start doing things. That was my downfall in top team, man. Honestly, I waited too long to start executing myself as a leader. And so like I didn't get the chance to lead from the front early to establish like, hey, I can lead, and so that was sort of the one, and that's just the way I lead, man. So that's why it was more of like it's like an eye opener to me to be like, hey, and it was tough for me to do it, but at the same time, like I had to come to a grasp like that's just the way I lead. Whenever I do a lot of physical events here at DIAS, when we do our rec marches, I'm always in the back, just hanging out with the back person, getting to know them, because I can see a lot from the rear. So that's one thing I tell a lot of people is don't be afraid to sit back, gather info, get to know people. And the senior and the superintendent will understand that if you let them know. If you come in with those clear expectations, like, hey, I just got into the schoolhouse. Let me take like 3 or 4 weeks to get to know the flight. and then me and you can sit down, establish some ROEs. I can tell you what I see. You tell me if I'm right or wrong, and then how I can help you from there. One thing I do want to talk about is sort of off topic, but I love the concept of time management. I feel like the Academy does a pretty good job teaching you guys, or not, maybe not teaching you, but forcing on you how to balance time. Tell me about that. Like, yeah, I feel like you guys are pretty busy over there, man, from what you're telling me. So,
Yeah, steep learning curve for that one. I know my freshman year, I loved playing on my phone until like 9. And then from 9 to 11, I just knock out however much homework I had and try to fit in that 2 hour window. And sometimes that ended up meaning I did really bad homework. And I got penalized for it in my GPA and everything. But over the course of time, I realized like, I don't need the phone, obviously, drop the phone. And now from like 5 to 7 or 5 to 8, when I would have been playing on my phone, like I'm doing the homework. And now all of a sudden it's 9 p.m. and this has never happened in my life until this year. Funny enough, I've always had a procrastination problem, but I finally got the willpower. So I put the phone down, do the homework first. And now all of a sudden it's 8 or 9. I've finished all my homework. I'm done working out for the day. I can sit down and watch like YouTube or watch a movie. And that's something that I wish I would have known earlier, how good it felt to get things done before 8 or 9 p.m. But yeah, that especially with top T, like working out 2, maybe sometimes 3 hours. It's like I have to work out, I have to lift. Now I'm so stressed out that I'm just gonna leave my phone in my room. I'm gonna go do everything. Like if someone sends me a Teams or an email, like I'm willing to take the risk, at least for those few weeks, of not opening it for 3 hours. Go do everything I need to get done, and then come back. I can deal with all the low threat stuff later, and then, God willing, I can sit down and watch a movie and de-stress for the night.
Do they teach you guys anything about time management, time control, auditing your schedule or habits, or um, or is it more just like you said, you just get your schedule, you try to balance what time you have, and then you learn from there?
They definitely have given us time to listen to what other people have to say about it. But in the end, from we and my buddies have kind of decided, it's not, that's what worked for them. Like it works differently for everybody else.
Yeah.
Some people lift in the morning. Some people lift from 9 to 10 p.m. right before the gym closes. Like everyone's got a different answer for the same problem, and they all equally work.
That's true. Yeah.
In the end, it's
everybody
just
has 24 hours, so no matter.
Yeah, like try something. If it doesn't work, try something else. It's like one of the top T principles of just throwing yourself in, make a decision, because that's better than sitting for 10 minutes and not making a decision at all.
Yeah, that's true. Nice. What other traits did you see on there that they may think they didn't know was a trait when you looked at it? That's usually a good one. Somebody would be like, "Oh, I didn't realize that."
Yeah, no as an answer is definitely not something that I imagined as a trait. But like when I read through that list yesterday, I related it to a few things. And like especially in leadership positions, I really think that being able to say no, if the good idea fairy shows up and they're giving you all these suggestions and you're like, no, especially when something's working, even if it's working slowly, it is working and the process is working. Maybe we're cutting it close to the time hack, but like the process is working. No, I'm not changing it. It's working perfectly fine. And I feel like the same is true for yes. Some people are super stubborn. They don't really want to change. They don't want to change their ideas. But if the good idea fairy comes along and it's actually a good idea, like, oh, this is going to help, then we should probably say yes and do it. And it's probably the same for everybody, depending on your personality type. Like you need to know when to say yes and when to say no.
Yeah, one of the biggest things I've seen with the no one is some people are just scared that the other person isn't going to accept it as an answer too. That's usually the tough one. Is most type A personalities are going to be able to say no because we're like stubborn at heart. So like we're not afraid to say no, but usually we don't say it because we're fearing the response of the other person. And so we question it, right? Like, well, I don't want to say no because this person may get mad at me or they may not understand it. So I have to think of something else, say that's more complicated but means the same thing. So that's one of the things. Anything else stand out? We'll do maybe one more and then we'll jump into the book.
I think knowing the basics
Yeah.
is probably the third one. And And that's kind of for everything. Like, especially in that USAFA or Air Force Academy example I gave. Like, if you're doing a group project and you don't understand the content, you're just going there because you want your credit for doing the project. It's like, it's probably better in the long run if you understand what you're doing before you go and help. Help is in quotes, but go help the group because you're not helping them. In the end, you're probably going to go over there and ask them why they're doing this, why they're doing that. It's going to take twice as long because now they're explaining their thought process. Mm-hmm. And then you still don't understand because you just learned a new decision-making process on top of the content. And you're like, man, I don't really know what I'm doing. But if you know the basics first, then everything's just going to be cleaned up.
Let me throw this at you. When you become a new flight commander, what are some of the basics you think you should know going into a TACP squadron? Overall, big picture.
That's a tough one.
It is, yeah.
Especially as a cadet, because we really don't have any exposure to what the actual job is like. But if you were asking me, I would think that one of the important basics to know is what your job is actually like. What are you actually doing? And then what on top of that, and that's not even one of the basics, but that's like what builds off the basics. It's like, what is my job? And then what can I do to help the team after, solidifying these basics? I feel like that's something that would be super important.
Yeah, that is a good one. I was going to throw some easy ones out there at you, like PT, right? Know the basics. Know maybe the show time for the day. Those are always like show times and schedule is always a good one to know. Some people may think these are easy, but they're not. Like some people do not know when to show up to work on time. So if you show up there and you're like, hey guys, I know PT starts at 7:30. We're going to shower, be in the office by 9. Bunches at 11. We're going to meet at 1500. Like those are the basics. Structure that, and then the rest of the day can fall in there. Obviously, Air Force standards, right? Knowing the basics 26-903, which is very big blue, like hold the jug but don't drink it is sort of what some people say. That's a good way to establish the basics when you're coming into those communities that are very tactically minded. So you're going to come around a lot of guys that are just like coming back from training with the Army or getting ready to go do another exercise or getting ready to go deploy. Some of the little things you can do are the basics. Like, hey guys, EPBs and OPBs are due. Here's your schedule. Then they're like, cool. I'm glad he told me that because now I don't have to worry about it. That's one less penguin on my brain. My boss has it. He knows the basics there. So the Air Force standards are always a good one. Showtimes are always a good one. Fitness is always a good basic thing to know. Like, hey guys, we have the OFT coming up. What are some of the basics on that? We know the exercises to do that. Let's make sure we're structuring our workouts there. Basic. You don't have to get too complicated into science of exercise or programming or whatever. Even life. Hey guys, did you tax season's coming up. Do you know how to do taxes? Like that's a basic thing that we can control and still help other people around us. But yeah, those are some good ones right there that you can take into and already like get some wins, right? You got to start piling those wins when you're a young person because that that's your ammo. That's all they're going to talk about your team. They're going to talk about the wins you provide them. Not the time you're taking away or what you don't know. But yeah, that's a good one. Cool. Let's jump into the book you brought, and then I will grab mine as well. What you got?
Yeah, so not a book that I have, but I think it's super important because I've never read this book. However, every single cadre member recommended that I read this book. And I said, that's like super interesting that all of you had the exact same book recommendation. Maybe that's just based on the feedback they had for me, but it sounds like everyone also got Legacy as a book recommendation.
Great book. Yeah.
Yeah. I've never read it, like I said, but it sounds like that book is a building block for not only leadership, but just team dynamics, getting everyone in there, getting everyone moving, like the things you need to know, especially as a leader, not only just a regular leader, but a leader in like a combat career field. It sounds like that is one of the Bibles.
Yeah. So funny story about that. When I went to visit the 14th ASOS up at Pope, I was walking around their flight rooms and on one of the desks of their shop was Legacy. And I went up to the NCO and I was like, dude, what's this book right here? I've never read it. Like, cause I tell people, like, I just love to read. So I'll look at people's desks and like look for a book if I don't know them. And he's like, oh, dude, you can grab it and read it if you want. I took it back to Shaw with me. I read it in like 2 weeks. I was going back up and I brought it back and put it back on the desk. And I was like, great book. It's short, it's simple. But what's cool about that book is it's not when he talks. So the guy talks about the teamwork of the All Blacks, and one of the things they do is they lead by example in all they do. They clean up their lockers when they leave. They take care of themselves outside of work. Like we heard it at Top T. The details matter, and the details matter to All Blacks. Most people, when they hear the All Blacks, they know, right? Like one of the best rugby teams. Like it's already established, and that's why I like that book. And I think that's why a lot of military people like it. It's because it's not a military book. It's a simple book, very good book. I like it. I think I have it in my box from my other office. But yeah, the one I was going to bring today, I just let another guy borrow, but it's Endure by Cameron Haynes. So the reason I like that book is Cameron Haynes is a guy like of grit, man. Like, so he lives a normal life in Oregon, working like a normal 9 to 5, but he's like stepped up in like this outdoor phenom, just like marathon running beast. But what his life is grit, man. Just like doing the hard things over and over and over, and almost and like so. When I went into Top T, my goal was to do hard things now to make it easy. I'm not saying Top T was easy, like it was freaking hard, but I was glad a lot of the things I did prior were hard because it just allowed me a little bit more comfortability on some of those events. But that's why I like Endure. Endure is also a cool book. It's just a different mindset. You know, it's not like a Goggins military book. It's very similar to Legacy. It's just about a normal guy that has, you know, done pretty cool things just in just a small town in Oregon, man. And he's done some great things. So that's the book I brought there. Do you have any last inputs?
All right, I left it all on the field today.
Perfect. That's the way to do it. All right. I'll do my final spiel. Everybody, thank you for listening. If you took anything from this, it's pretty easy to share nowadays. Just save, comment, follow, whatever you got to do. Zane, I'll reach out to you after, and we'll put some of your details below in the feedback and like the details area. So if people want to reach out to you and ask questions or just give you a follow as you continue your journey through the academy and Top T, or not Top T, but the schoolhouse, they can follow you and do that. But thank you everybody for joining and listening, and stay tuned for the next one because it's just going to get better, and we'll add some more tools to that toolbox. All right, man. We'll end here, and then we'll wait for a couple seconds.